So this is a Jacobit's Learning podcast. It came from some SAT questions that we had, and we were talking about some things, and we just wanted to say, like, some people in here are Democrats, maybe one or two is a Republican, and we work together. But the point is that, more importantly, the point is that it is upsetting and disturbing that Donald Trump had an assassination attack, but it just goes to show the atmosphere and the climate of America. And that climate is one of fear, one of tragic inflation, and also the adversarial aspects of it and the ancillary events that happen. Like, for instance, there's a lot of homelessness. People are not getting paid as much, if at all. Some people are not paid enough. Minimum wage is going up to $13 in a couple of months, but that's still under what it is needed to live in the United States, and especially in expensive places like New York, South Florida, California. And, it seems like no one's doing anything about it. But at the other end of it, the people who we have running for office, they're getting chided, labeled, physically hurt. And it just goes to show, like, is there anybody we really like who doesn't get up and say something? So I wanted to start this podcast off with one of the that we have. And these are questions that came up for our reading comprehension section of the SAT. Let me say here that at Jacobit's Learning, we do use real SAT questions for our SAT preparation, but we also use questions that we make up on our own. We have two curriculum specialists who are certified to do so, who've received extensive training making up questions. And so, bringing us back, journalists have labeled President Joseph Robinette Biden as a geriatric egotist. Yet Biden is running for public audience. The media has bludgeoned President Joe Biden while claiming to help the Democratic Party. So how does a loyal Democrat openly criticize the current leader of the United States? The simple answer is bandwagon appeal. Since every other journalist criticized President Biden, the others jumped onto the scrutinization wagon. And worse, the wagon is still going because it hasn't met its destination. Every day there's something else that is said about President Biden, and it keeps going, keeps going, and keeps going. And a magic trick, what people, and especially some Democrats, are doing is to Biden is called, they're putting him on the prestige. And they present their most valuable part of a trick, but then they pulled him out and left him in a dupe. In a chess game, we call what is happening to President Joseph Robinette Biden, we call President Biden a backward pawn because he's not protected by his own people. The other thing that I wanted to get at is the word geriatric is used pejoratively, although being an elder person is not so bad. If we all live long enough, we'll all be geriatrics. The thing I wanted to get at is that if we label people because of their age, we're complicating an issue. Now, there are people who've done things like, for instance, Dr. An Wang, who did Wang Computers, actually climbed parts of Mount Everest at age 90. Okay, Nola Oakes received her master's degree at 98. Anna Mary Robertson Moses, known as Grandma Moses, painted at age 87. Pablo Picasso sculpted his whole life and painted his whole life, but his Afghan hound, he painted that 6 years shy of his 91st birthday, and he refused money for the sculpture as a gift to the city of Chicago. So Picasso was 85, and at age 85, the city of Chicago was going to pay him. He said, no, it's a gift to you. I have enough. Okay, and no one called him a geriatric. No one said, hey, you know what? You're kind of slow. You're not taking money for your gift. They just said, okay, Picasso, accepted him for who he was. Okay, Sir Robert Meyer performed on stage at age 100. So limiting people on any age. If there is a legal age that you have to be to run for presidential office. Okay, but a person is also supposed to be looked at for the total years of tutelage, for what they do, and for what they do as a person. And President Joseph Biden said that. He had gotten the manufacturing bills passed during his administration. I believe he also got a homeless bill passed, homeless and also affected veterans and other people. No one seemed to bring those up. He was more ridiculed for his age and moments of forgetfulness during a debate with a, may I remind you, a formerly impeached candidate. And very few people brought that up. So what we want to do is hear your comments. We're taking them by email. We're at Jacovitz, JACOVITZ, learning, LEARNING, so learning all together, lowercase, uppercase, doesn't matter, at gmail.com. What are your comments? What are your comments or questions? And so we have this from one of our emails. What does it matter whether the president is a Democrat or a Republican? Neither candidate did anything to stop the homelessness or to address the high prices for housing. The cost of food and gas have gone up too. How do they solve these problems? And on to my next set. I'm just taking some things that were researched. And I'm not going to lie, this question came from an in-house email. So let's go ahead and answer it, though. The homelessness problem seems to not have a solution, but then there is the bill that the U.S. Congress introduced in 2022. They introduced this bill to help provide stability to homeless people, especially those with behavioral or mental health problems. And before we start labeling again and talking about people with behavioral or mental problems, some of those mental health problems came as a result of being, overseas. Okay, helping with the Ukrainian situation, genocide along the Sudan, and also obviously our latest war. Okay, and people who are United States citizens would be privy to this. And remember, you have people who go into shell shock, post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome. So that bill was needed. Okay, Senator Maxine Waters brought to Congress the Ending Homeless Bill in 2023. The bill was passed July 10th, 2023. And I have this link if you want to click on it. The bill summary can be found on the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services webpage. So it's https://democrats-financial-services.house.gov/news documents single.axpx document ID equals 410576. Now, a summary of the co-sponsors of this bill include the following people: Juan Vargas, Suzanne Bonamici, Emmanuel Cleaver, Sylvia Garcia, Gwen Moore, James McGovern, Richie Torres, Al Green, Mark Pocan, Gregory Meeks, Stephen Horsford, Nikema Williams, Stephen Lynch, Sidney Kamlagardov, Rashida Tlaib, Salud Carvajal, Joyce Beatty, Henry C. Hank Johnson Jr., Adam Smith, Grace Ming, Eleanor Holmes Knowlton, Morgan McGarvey, and Brittany Peterson. So you have some people who sponsored that, and amazingly, you had to have a certain amount of Democrats and Republicans push this bill through. So people at least seems to see what's going on with that bill. And when you turn on and look at the document ID, it comes up in a portable document file. Okay, and a PDF file comes out and explains what the purpose of the bill was. Okay, a lot of people are depressed out here, and they're not suffering from mental health problems, other than general depression from not receiving housing. There were also supposed to be vouchers given, where if they couldn't afford they came out of a high crime area, they could go into another area with the voucher. And we've had people tell us as we go out and ask these questions, but here's the situation that some private owners of homes will not accept vouchers. And because the owner owns the home, he doesn't have to accept it. He doesn't have to let you in. So, there's still affordable housing out there for people who want to live in, like apartments or townhomes. A lot of people who are in high crime areas cannot use those vouchers because some people actually own homes in other areas, don't want to rent to them. And that's a question we have to go over. And Congress needs to address, maybe with some kind of like discrimination, against, who knows what, or something. And then there's another problem. If you're a homeowner who happens to rent your home or rent a part of it, you don't want to be dictated and told who you have to let in your house. So we've got that issue.
So there is $150 billion being spread to the ending homelessness bill? Probably. Governmental bureaucracy has been slow to distribute the funds.
Also, we need help with the inflated prices on food and gas. Also, we need help with the
Yeah, and still, I feel these are questions to which we do not have answers. Presidential candidates and their support is waning. And also, as the population's general consent on the ability to handle the questions that the average American needs answered. So we're starting back at square one with this podcast. On the other side, we've had some good bills passed by Republicans too. We had Republicans Bill 3722, H.R. 3722, Daniel J. Harvey Jr. and Adam Lambert improving service member transition to reduce veteran suicide. So, like it says, they're trying to spend some money to see if they can't find some programs that promote reducing veterans suicide. I guess combat gets too hard overseas. And so there are some positive things introduced both by Republicans and Democrats. Now, this leads me to ask the next question, which is, does it really matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat who's in office? Because Congress is where most of these bills go. You've had presidents who can veto bills, but if you look at the history of vetoing bills, most of them have not vetoed bills anyway. So that lends us to, what are we going to be doing this November, which is still a nebulous question hanging over many Republicans, Democrats, independents heads. So we've had a couple of comments, but let's go back to the backward pond situation, because that's what started this. We cannot forget about labeling or mislabeling of President Biden. And even if we mislabel President Biden, or if we blame some of the past failures on former President Trump, it appears that despite who was president, both sides of the Republican and Democrats that were in Congress, although they were against each other, on some levels they were still passing bills that were needed for the American populace, despite their parties' loyalties. And both parties needed members of the other party to pass the bills. So it didn't seem like there was too much discrepancy, although it appeared there was, to pass the bills regardless of their party's loyalties. So I am inclined to think that perhaps we don't need to look at the president unless you have a very, very divisive president and a very, very extremist president who wants to come and uproot that. So when I first thought about this, we wrote about what a geriatric egotist does. You know, we have to remember why people labeled Biden, why people ridiculed Biden. Some Democratic fear came out that that the Democrats won't win the election. And, you know, we can't undermine that the Biden administration enacted the CHIPS Act. That brought manufacturing jobs back. President Biden did say that. The American Rescue Plan to help COVID-ridden society get free vaccines. And yet all of this, it was done, or people still think there should be more. And I was inclined to believe them. I was very glad to see the homeless bill has been passed, but really there's little enactment to it and there's little done. So I also thought that criticism of Joe Biden began for one night show at the debate. So his debate kind of pulled down his criticism. Are there any comments on that?